One of the biggest questions I get from men is this: how do I ask for intimacy without killing the moment, without making it awkward, and without making it feel like I'm begging for something? And here's the thing. Most people think intimacy is about the right move, the right line, or the right timing. But the truth is, it's more about psychology than it is about technique. If you understand how the mind works in moments of connection, you'll realize intimacy doesn't need to be asked for in the way most people imagine. It needs to be invited. When most people think about intimacy, they focus on the physical side of it. They think it's about the right move, the right moment, or the perfect line that makes everything click. But the truth is, intimacy begins long before there's any physical closeness at all. It begins with the feeling of emotional safety, the sense that being close is not only possible, but also comfortable and natural. Without that foundation, even the most well-timed move will feel awkward or forced. That's why the most attractive thing you can do isn't to rush into closeness. It's to create the conditions where closeness feels effortless. Think about it like this. If someone doesn't feel safe in your presence, every move you make will be met with resistance. It won't matter how confident you are, how charming your words sound, or how attractive you look in that moment. Safety isn't just about avoiding danger. It's about creating an environment where the other person can relax and drop their guard. Emotional safety is what transforms a moment from stiff and mechanical into warm and inviting. It's the difference between someone holding back and someone leaning in naturally because they feel they won't be judged, rejected, or pressured. So how do you actually create this sense of emotional safety? One of the simplest ways is through attention. When you're really present with someone, when you're listening instead of waiting for your turn to speak, you're showing that you value them. Presence communicates that you're not trying to rush anywhere, that you're actually enjoying the moment as it is. And when someone feels that from you, their defenses lower. It's subtle, but it's powerful, because presence is rare. Most people are distracted, half on their phone, half in their head, and when you cut through that noise by truly being there, it feels like a safe space opens up. Another element of safety is playfulness. Laughter is one of the fastest shortcuts to intimacy because it dissolves tension and breaks through walls. When you can laugh together, you create a space that feels light, unthreatening, and connected. That's why teasing, light humor, and playful energy go such a long way. They show that you're not trying to force a serious outcome, you're just enjoying the process of connection. And that enjoyment is what makes the idea of closeness feel less like a decision to be made and more like a natural step forward. Emotional safety also comes from consistency. If your energy is unpredictable, warm one moment, cold the next, engaged one day, distant the next, it creates anxiety. No one can feel comfortable opening up in an environment that feels uncertain. Consistency in how you show up, how you speak, how you treat someone makes them feel that they're not stepping into quicksand every time they're around you. That stability is what makes them feel they can lean into you without worrying about the ground collapsing beneath them. Reliability may not sound exciting, but it's the thing that allows excitement to build. One of the biggest mistakes people make is thinking intimacy is about taking shortcuts, about trying to leap into closeness without building the groundwork. But when you do that, the other person's guard goes up because they don't yet feel that emotional comfort. That's why so many moves that people try to make end up backfiring. They're skipping the step that matters most. Emotional safety isn't glamorous, but it's the invisible ingredient that makes everything else possible. Without it, nothing works. With it, everything flows. And here's the beauty of it. Once you've created emotional safety, you don't even have to ask for intimacy in a direct way. It becomes something that arises naturally out of the connection you've built. Because intimacy is not just about what happens physically. It's about the feeling that both of you are in a space where it feels right to let down the walls. That's why the real psychological trick isn't about words or lines or clever tactics. It's about creating the type of environment where someone feels at ease, where they feel free, where they feel safe to lean closer instead of holding back. One of the most common mistakes people make when it comes to intimacy is treating it like a transaction. They approach it as if they're asking for something to be handed over, like borrowing a book or ordering a meal. The problem with this approach is that it places all the pressure on the other person to decide yes or no in that moment, and pressure is the enemy of attraction. When someone feels cornered by a direct demand, they instinctively put their guard up. That resistance has nothing to do with desire. It has everything to do with the way the request was framed. Psychology teaches us that the human brain is far more receptive to suggestion than it is to direct instruction. If I tell you not to think about a pink elephant, your brain instantly imagines one. If I suggest that you might notice a certain feeling or thought, your mind becomes curious and starts searching for it on its own. This is the power of suggestion. It works by planting a seed and letting the other person water it themselves. In the context of intimacy, suggestion creates space for curiosity, while direct demands shut that curiosity down. So instead of saying something blunt or overly forward, you create an invitation that feels subtle and open-ended. It could be as simple as a gentle comment, a playful hint, or an energy shift that makes the idea present without shoving it into the spotlight. The difference is that you're not asking for a transaction. You're allowing the other person to walk through a door that you've left slightly open. That door being half open is far more enticing than one that's shoved wide with a sign saying, "Enter now." Suggestion sparks imagination, and imagination is where intimacy begins to build. This is why the most attractive moments of connection are never about a script of exact words. They're about creating a vibe that feels inviting. A look, a pause, a shift in tone can all act as subtle suggestions that intimacy is on the horizon. The beauty of this method is that it allows the other person to feel that they're making the choice themselves, which is crucial. Nobody wants to feel like they're being pressured into something. They want to feel like they're stepping into it because they want to. Suggestion preserves freedom of choice while still guiding the energy in the direction you want it to go. Think of it like a dance. If you pull too hard, you throw the rhythm off. If you stand still, nothing happens. But if you give a subtle cue with your body, you guide the movement without force. Suggestion in intimacy works the same way. It's about leading gently while allowing the other person to respond naturally. That's what makes a moment feel like it's unfolding effortlessly, instead of being negotiated or demanded. It doesn't feel like you're asking for something. It feels like both of you are discovering it together. Another reason suggestion works so well is that it taps into the psychology of desire itself. Desire isn't about certainty, it's about possibility. The hint of something, the playful suggestion, the small tease, all of these create anticipation. And anticipation is far more powerful than any blunt request could ever be. When you use suggestion, you're creating a sense of what if, and that question is what draws people forward. Direct demands close doors, but suggestion leaves them slightly ajar, inviting curiosity to do the rest. When you master this art, you realize you never need to frame intimacy as a request. Instead, you weave it into the moment with subtlety, playfulness, and presence. You let it build naturally, guided not by pressure, but by suggestion. That's when intimacy feels exciting instead of heavy, inviting instead of forced. It feels like something both people stumbled into together because the moment simply pulled them there, not because someone demanded it. That's why the psychological trick isn't about bold statements. It's about the quiet power of suggestion that makes intimacy feel like the most natural next step. One of the most important psychological elements of intimacy is rhythm. Think of rhythm as the invisible thread that keeps two people in sync. The thing that makes every interaction feel natural instead of awkward. If one person is racing ahead emotionally or physically while the other is still warming up, it creates tension. That tension doesn't build attraction, it kills it because it feels like one person is pulling while the other is resisting. But when you're in rhythm, when you're attuned to where the other person is, intimacy feels like the obvious next step instead of a leap into uncomfortable territory. This is where the idea of mirroring comes in. Mirroring isn't about copying someone's every move. It's about paying close attention to their comfort level and matching it. If their energy is calm and measured, you don't come in with overwhelming intensity. If they're playful and teasing, you match that playfulness instead of shutting it down. By mirroring the energy they're giving you, you send a subtle psychological signal that says, I understand you, I'm with you, and I'm moving at your pace. That signal is what makes someone relax and feel safe leaning closer. The opposite of this is when someone tries to push intimacy too quickly. They raise the energy too high, or they make a physical move that feels premature, and the result is resistance. It's not because there's no attraction, it's because the pacing was off. Attraction works like music. A great song doesn't hit the chorus in the first 3 seconds. It builds, it layers, it creates momentum, and when the big moment comes, it feels natural and earned. Mirroring ensures that you're building that momentum together instead of skipping steps. What makes mirroring so powerful is that it creates alignment. Alignment means you're both tuned into each other instead of one person trying to dictate the pace. People feel most comfortable when they sense that their signals are being read and respected. If they lean in, you lean in. If they slow down, you slow down. This isn't about overthinking every move. It's about being present enough to notice what's happening in real time. Presence gives you the awareness to match, and matching creates the harmony that makes intimacy flow. Another reason mirroring matters is because it avoids the trap of making intimacy feel one-sided. When someone pushes too hard, it feels like their desire is driving everything, and that makes the other person feel like an accessory instead of a participant. But when you mirror, you show that you're not just focused on what you want, you're tuned into what's happening between the two of you. That sense of collaboration is deeply attractive because it turns intimacy into a shared experience, not a performance or an obligation. There's also a deeper psychological principle at play here. People are drawn to those who make them feel understood. When you mirror comfort levels, you're showing understanding not through words but through actions. You're saying, I get you, I respect your pace, and I value how you feel. That unspoken message builds more trust than any clever line ever could. It turns the moment into something fluid, where both people feel like they're being seen and responded to, not pressured or overlooked. That's why mirroring isn't just a technique, it's a way of communicating empathy. When you bring this kind of empathy into intimacy, everything shifts. You stop thinking about what the right move is and start focusing on where the other person actually is. You listen with your eyes, your body language, your attention. You allow the pace to reveal itself instead of trying to control it. And when you do that, intimacy doesn't feel like a negotiation. It feels like the most natural outcome of two people who are in sync, moving together at the same rhythm and letting the moment carry them forward. One of the fastest ways to kill attraction is to frame intimacy like it's something you're asking for, almost like a favor that needs to be granted. When it's positioned this way, it immediately creates imbalance. One person looks like they're chasing, while the other looks like they're deciding whether to reward that effort. That dynamic is deeply unattractive because it shifts intimacy into a transactional space rather than keeping it in the space of mutual excitement. Attraction thrives when it feels like something two people are leaning into together, not when it feels like one person is petitioning the other for permission. This mindset trap usually comes from a place of insecurity. If you see intimacy as something to be earned, you begin to act like it's an achievement you need approval for. But when you show up with that frame, you lose the very confidence that makes someone drawn to you in the first place. People don't want to feel like they're granting you a prize. They want to feel like they're stepping into an experience that excites both of you equally. Framing intimacy as a shared desire removes the imbalance and places both people on the same level, moving towards something together. So how do you actually make that shift? It starts with the way you think about intimacy. Instead of seeing it as a goal, see it as an expression of connection. When you approach the moment from the perspective that this is something both of you get to enjoy, you stop asking for it and you start sharing in it. That mental reframing changes your energy in subtle but powerful ways. You no longer come across as someone trying to take. You come across as someone inviting another person into something that feels mutual, natural, and exciting. One of the easiest ways to embody this mindset is in how you speak. Instead of language that positions intimacy as a request, can I, or would you let me, you use language that suggests shared participation. You're not waiting for approval. You're co-creating a moment. Even the way you phrase things can shift the power dynamic. For example, subtle suggestions that highlight mutual enjoyment signal that this is about the two of you stepping into something together, not about one trying to pull something from the other. That difference is what makes intimacy feel desirable instead of pressured. The psychology here is important. People want to feel desired, not negotiated with. If the frame is that you're asking for a favor, it feels transactional, which pulls romance out of the moment. But if the frame is that you're both caught up in the same spark, then intimacy becomes something that feels inevitable rather than forced. This is where confidence plays a huge role, because when you believe you're part of a shared desire, you naturally stop pleading for it. Confidence shifts the energy from needy to magnetic, and that shift makes all the difference. Another piece of this is understanding that attraction grows when there's reciprocity. Reciprocity means both people are investing, both people are responding, both people are giving and receiving at the same time. When intimacy is framed as a favor, reciprocity disappears. It's one-sided. But when intimacy is framed as shared desire, reciprocity is baked into the moment. Each person feels that they're contributing to the connection, which makes it exciting and rewarding for both. The more balanced the exchange, the stronger the attraction becomes. When you internalize this idea, the way you carry yourself changes. You stop approaching intimacy with hesitation or doubt, and you start approaching it with the assurance that this is something meant to be experienced together. That assurance is contagious. It allows the other person to relax, to feel desired, and to step into the moment with you instead of feeling like they're being asked to deliver something. And that's the point. Intimacy isn't about convincing someone. It's about creating the environment where both people want to be there equally, leaning into the same fire at the same time. When most people think about intimacy, they make the mistake of treating it as a heavy, serious milestone. They think it has to be handled with perfect precision, careful words, and tense anticipation. But what actually opens the door to intimacy faster than anything else is playfulness. Playfulness creates lightness. It dissolves tension, lowers defenses, and makes connection feel fun instead of pressured. When the energy is playful, intimacy stops being a decision someone has to make. It becomes the natural outcome of enjoying the moment too much to hold back. Playfulness has a psychological effect on the brain that makes it incredibly powerful in building closeness. When we laugh, when we tease, when we share something silly together, the brain releases chemicals that associate the other person with safety and joy. Suddenly, the connection doesn't feel like a performance. It feels like freedom. That sense of freedom is what makes someone lean closer, because they know they won't be judged, they won't be criticized, and they won't be burdened. Instead, they're simply having fun, and intimacy becomes a continuation of that fun. Curiosity works hand in hand with playfulness because it takes the pressure off needing to know exactly where the moment is heading. When you're curious, you're not locked into an outcome. You're exploring. Curiosity turns every interaction into a discovery. Instead of thinking, what move should I make next? The mindset shifts to, I wonder what happens if I do this. That frame of exploration creates a dynamic where both people feel like they're in an adventure together. Intimacy then feels less like a target and more like a journey, and journeys are far more enjoyable than checklists. This is why so many romantic moments that people describe later are filled with laughter and teasing, not solemn speeches. The little jokes, the playful touches, the shared inside references, these are the things that make people feel close. They don't remember the perfect line, they remember the spark of fun that made the moment feel alive. When you bring playfulness into the way you connect, you stop trying to be impressive and start being magnetic. That magnetism comes from showing that you can enjoy the moment without attaching heavy expectation to it. What's interesting is that playfulness doesn't mean being immature or careless. It means bringing a sense of lightheartedness to moments that might otherwise feel loaded with pressure. It means knowing when to turn the tension into a joke, when to lean back with a smile, when to tease gently to make the other person relax. It's about reminding them, and yourself, that connection isn't supposed to feel like hard work. When intimacy is paired with laughter and curiosity, it feels like something you both stumbled into while having fun, not something one of you calculated or forced. There's also a deeper confidence hidden inside playfulness. To be playful, you have to be secure enough to not take yourself too seriously. Insecure people cling tightly to control because they're afraid of being embarrassed or rejected. Confident people can be playful because they know that even if something doesn't land perfectly, it's okay. That sense of ease is attractive because it signals that you're not desperate for approval. You're just enjoying the process, and that makes someone want to join you in that energy. Playfulness communicates abundance. You're not trying to win or lose, you're simply enjoying what's unfolding. And here's the real magic. When you lead with playfulness and curiosity, intimacy doesn't feel like a request. It feels like momentum. It feels like the natural next step of two people who are laughing, teasing, and exploring together. There's no awkward transition, no heavy silence, no nervous waiting. There's just a flow, a sense of inevitability, because the energy has been light and inviting all along. That's why playfulness isn't just a nice bonus. It's the catalyst that makes intimacy feel exciting, spontaneous, and completely natural.